Back in 2021, I had an idea for a horror story about art students looking for monsters. I was frustrated with the state of the creative industry, watching promising projects get shelved, and had a desire to put that energy into something creative. Not knowing how things were going to go from there, I took that energy and started working on this story until, in December of 2023, I launched the first 5 pages of In Harmony. Now on the webcomic's 2nd year anniversary, we have officially reached 1/3 into the 4th chapter of the story, completing 3 chapters in the process. I like making my December videos tied to In Harmony somehow. Last year I talked about webcomic projects I tried to make in the past, and for future videos I want to make them either about In Harmony, Appalachia, horror, or webcomics. Whatever catches my mind as the month approaches. But I never did a full detailed video about the characters. I made some shorts to introduce the cast back before the webcomic officially started, but nothing that was more detailed than who they are. Last year we had just finished chapter 2, and the whole main cast had not been introduced at that point, so I didn't do one then. We have so many other characters who will eventually show up in the comic, so I thought for now, why don't I make this year's anniversary video about who we have met so far, and give some backstory about how they came to be. Some of them have barely changed since conception, while others have drastically changed, and the story itself went through a lot of changes since I first came up with it. If you already read In Harmony, I hope this acts as a nice little bit of extra lore for the characters, and if you're new, then maybe you'll consider reading. In Harmony is on inharmony.the-comic.org and is free to read. So let's get started. I think it would be fun to start with the changes in the story first. I can't get into everything that is different, as parts that have the most changes don't happen until near the end of the comic, but I can say that most characters in Harmony were going to die at one point. I originally had the idea of making the story a tragedy, but that idea only lasted about a week. With the themes I wanted to explore, a tragedy didn't fit the main story, but after some thought and some tweaks, I got an ending that fit better. But it leaves some of the more bittersweet and even some tragic aspects of the original outline, including, like character death. Cause what better way to pull at the audience's heartstrings than to kill off someone's blorbo? My original plan for In Harmony was to start with a short found footage type of animated series that originally was going to be what became the plot of season 1. I was going to do a series of videos and then have the comics start after that, until I realized that the found footage style I was originally going to do didn't really fit for the character development that would have had to have happened unless In Harmony was like a completely animated series. God, doing that would have been the dream. The characters would have had a bunch of development before I even introduced Pacific, who is supposed to be our main character of the whole comic, and they wouldn't have showed up until after this development, which was no good because they are the main character, and I couldn't just write them out of the story because they get so involved with the plot. I cannot have the other characters fill that role. It does not work for any of them. So I decided to take most of the aspects of that prequel story, combine it into what I already had planned for season 1, which was admittedly not a lot at the time, and make that the first season. What didn't get put into season 1 was written to be the inciting incidents that got Pacific's friends involved with Ingrid and all the monster stuff. I juggled back and forth on what I wanted to do story length-wise for the first season. The original outline was going to be 13 chapters, but with some rearranging, combining, a little cutting, and shifting some things off later into the story, that would make the final result be 10 chapters for season 1 with a goal of 4 more seasons with 10 chapters in each season. Hopefully not that many, because that would make 50 chapters of comic in all, but I am persistent, and luckily none of my outline is set into stone past season 1, so who knows? Who knows what will happen? I ended up picking West Virginia for the location of the story because I like the Appalachia region. I'm personally not from it, but I just really like it a lot I don't really can't explain it. And I also just think the mountains are really pretty. There's more to it than that, but let's go with that for now. I also just love learning about the early 20th century labor movement centered around that region, specifically with miners. And it's just really fascinating to me. Most people's favorite periods of history involve wars or explorations, but I'm just sitting here with a huge fascination of 1900 to 1930 American history. The story was planned to be in a small town at a college pretty early on, but originally Arya's name was not Arya, but Mayfield. I ended up changing it because there's a town in Kentucky called Mayfield, and I didn't want people getting confused with which state the story takes place in, since parts of Kentucky are also in Appalachia. I can't be saying like, here's Mayfield, West Virginia in Appalachia, and then people being like, well, Mayfield's not in Appalachia. Mayfield is like in parts of Kentucky that are not in there, and I have to be like, well, Mayfield's also not in West Virginia. It would just been like a whole thing, and I didn't want to deal with it. Also, the podcast Mayfair Watcher Society is a thing, and it wasn't part of the reason why I changed Arya's name to Arya, because I wasn't thinking of Mayfair Watcher Society when I was like, oh, Mayfield, Kentucky's a thing, I'm gonna change Arya's name to Arya. But like, I'm also like glad I did, because I don't want my small town full of monsters that could be confused with another small town full of monsters. Their names are way too similar. And also the name Arya is very fitting, considering the comic is called In Harmony, and Arya is a solo song in an opera, and I find that very thematically fitting. I didn't do as much research though when it came to what is supposed to be the fictional county Arya is in, or would be in if it was a real town. But somehow, and I don't know how, but somehow this mishap worked entirely in my favor in ways I could never have predicted, so let's talk about that. So I wanted this fictional county Arya is in to be called Upshur County, and before you leave a comment, yes, I know. I brainstormed what else in this fictional county there could be, but never really actually looked up any West Virginia county names, which I will admit is a mistake on my part. I did go out of my way to make sure there was no actual Arya, West Virginia, but God forbid I go check to see if there's an Upshur County. And I had in my mind like where Arya would be located at, and then a little over a year after I started the comic, I found a map of all the counties in West Virginia, and apparently there already is an Upshur County. But not only that, it is literally right around in the area where I thought Arya would be located. Arya would probably be closer to the southeastern part of Upshur County, but like really close to the border with Rudolph County. You could just like leave town heading east, and it's barely a 5-minute drive before you're crossing the county lines. A happy accident that somehow worked so well for me. The cast started off a lot smaller too. Unlike our 7 main cast members, we originally only had 5. For a while, there was a version of In Harmony where Ingrid and Joel were not in the story, and there was even a version where only Joel wasn't going to be in the story. I am someone who doesn't like adding characters to fill roles if someone already can fill that role and they are more established in the story than a brand new character would be. So yeah, I did end up having good reasons to add more characters, and these arcs are going to be very good when we get to them. So why don't we go talk about the characters and how they changed through the development, starting with our main protagonist, Pacific Zervek. Pacific is the child of divorced parents. They're also agender, and they're a poet who doesn't have that much experience in writing poetry, but is very determined to make it work. They spent a lot of their life living in Buffalo, New York with their mom, their stepdad, and 2 younger siblings, and had the occasional visit to their dad back in Arya, West Virginia. Pacific is very determined, stubborn character, but unfortunately that also comes with a lot of doubt and uncertainty. Pacific desperately needs Wicca to work and can't have anything disrupt that for reasons we will eventually get to in the comic. And the last time we saw them at the end of chapter 3, they finally had their first encounter with a monster, and it did not go well at all. We haven't seen them since, but I'm sure they're doing just fine. So when I first came up with In Harmony, I didn't have a main character in mind. I had the first 5 characters and a vague idea for like a thing about them. One would be like the mom friend, one is a rock star who hates his hometown, one is suffering from gifted kid burnout syndrome, etc, etc. But Pacific was one of those cases where I didn't know exactly what their deal was. Most times when writing characters, if I come across this problem, I would have the character not be in the story, but in this case, because I like barely had anything set in stone for any of the characters, I decided to wing it with some character brainstorming. Nothing like thinking hard about a character until you can make them work. The poet part came easily enough. I knew I wanted all my characters to be creatives of some kind. For example, Nemesis and Meredith are musicians, Jules is a sculptor, Seamus is an actor, and Ingrid and Joel, who were not at the story at this point but eventually will be, were both a photographer and a sequential artist respectively. I landed on Pacific being a writer pretty quickly and decided that they would be a poet, which is funny because before this comic I didn't write any poetry. Leading up to the first chapter, I did write some for practice, but like Pacific, I am completely new to all of it. But it's been fun. I hope to improve my skills with that as I keep making pages of my comic, just as hopefully Pacific will improve in their own poetic endeavors. I also really wanted them to be different from the other protagonists. Whereas most of the crew are ready to go running into the woods looking for danger, I wanted Pacific to be completely against that. A protagonist who gets involved into the plot kicking and screaming the whole way, but once they're in the thick of it, they're like, oh, actually, I'm more into this than I thought I'd like to be. They're a fun character to explore, and they have a lot going on, like, why does their mom hate their hometown so much? What is really going on with the monster stuff in town, and why has nobody ever done anything about it? How come nobody seems to notice there are monsters in Aria? Some fun mysteries that may get answers someday. Next we have Meredith Sims, our small town rock star and one of Pacific's childhood best friends. Meredith is a tall, lanky, punk kid, very obviously queer, and tends to be shunned by the older folk in town because of their rambunctious lifestyle. Meredith is a character whose past is defined by a lot of hurt from his parents, his older sister, his community, even from someone he thought was his friend. He wants to leave it all behind and go on his way to take his music career somewhere, and at this point, he doesn't care if he has to be broken on the street to do it. Unfortunately for Meredith, he has ties to Aria that keep him around, mainly his relationship with Nemesis, but also because he kinda wants to see where this monster shit goes. Meredith wasn't the most into the cryptid stuff he grew up with. He thinks that Aria having a mirror man as a town monster was a stupid idea for a cryptid. Wonder what that's about, But after his first monster encounter, he kind of got, really into it and became invested in finding out why he never knew about Aria's cooler ghoulies that were apparently already there. Meredith was one of the first characters I came up with, and he actually came together quickest of the main cast and has the littlest of changes since. Fun fact, he originally was going to be a Magnus Archives OC, specifically an eye avatar, and I sketched this one headshot of him before I came up with In Harmony. It's the only Magnus Archives adjacent drawing I have of him though. I ended up making Dorian instead because Meredith didn't quite fit what I wanted for my eye avatar, at least in the visuals, but I kept the centralized heterochromia I give all the avatars when I made him in a character for In Harmony. I liked it, and I like giving my normal human characters fun eye colors. I mean, when I made my Tim Stoker and Sasha James designs, I also gave them purple eyes. I know what I like, and I like characters with purple eyes, even though humans don't have purple eyes. Meredith is one of my favorite characters to write for, but he's also a personal one to me. A sort of character who's just so tired of a lot of BS and wants to leave everything behind for greener pastures, but the ties that keep him in Aria are too important for him to leave. That doesn't stop the anger and bitterness from stewing, and who knows what will happen when it finally spills over. But it is impossible to talk about Meredith without talking in some capacity about his queer platonic partner, Nemesis Henderson. Nemesis is the mom friend of the group, the one who's there for people she cares about and isn't afraid to step up when needed. She can be a bit reckless and act first, ask questions later girly, and that has gotten her into trouble before, but hey, she's doing fine, so it can't all be bad, right? Nemesis isn't from Aria, rather she's actually from Missoula, Montana, and moved to Aria when she's a teenager. For my Far Cry 5 fans, yeah, I picked Missoula on purpose, since it's the closest non-fictional city to Hope County. I spent so much time on that game, how can I not sneak in one little vague reference? Nemesis likes to take care of others, but doesn't like being taken care of. She doesn't want to appear fragile, all due to her past that we have not quite got to in the comic yet, but I am very excited to talk more about it when we get there. Nemesis is a character who I was very particular on. Her personality pretty much has been the same since creation, but I really wanted to know what made her tick. She can't just be the punk friend who's there for everyone. I needed to know how she is and how she thinks and where she started to later be this pretty well-functioning character that everyone knows her as. I think I figured that out when writing a lot of her backstory because like Pacific, Nemesis is a child of divorce, but unlike Pacific, she doesn't talk to her mom anymore. Her father remarried and Nemesis pretty much adopted her stepmother as her new mom. Nemesis is also the most religious of the main group, and that'll be something more to explore when we finally get to it. Lots of fun stuff there. Like a lot of characters in Harmony, Nemesis is trans, and also her backstory does involve her coming out. I very much do not want to write a whole, transgender ink storyline. Nemesis is a confident woman who's happy with who she is and how she looks and with the person who she has grown to be, and although that growing still has more work to do, the last thing I want to do is write a people won't accept me because I'm trans storyline for a character whose acceptance of her identity is not the part that needs to be developed. Nemesis being Filipino was also something that was a part of her character right off the bat. She's just fully formed in my head, and outside of the writing, hasn't changed much when I got used to drawing her. My biggest regret is that of everyone in the main cast, she's the one who gets the most sidelined for character development during season 1 of In Harmony, but if you already love Nemesis, then you'll love it when we get to season 2 and she gets to have more of the spotlight. I have so much stuff planned for her. I am also very, very particular with writing her and Meredith's relationship. Both Nemesis and Meredith are asexual, but Meredith is specifically sex repulsed and Nemesis is not. She's just Aero Ace. There's some stuff in comic I want to get to before talking more about it, but it was very important for me to have different kinds of ace characters in the story, especially someone who's ace myself, and avoid the one trope that I hate when talking about and writing ace characters. The angst in the relationship is because one character is too ace to have sex with their partner, and I hate it so much. It's so tired. We can do better. We can do better. Meredith and Nemesis are not the only ace characters who are in relationships with people, and I also have characters who are ace in relationships with non-ace people in this comic, and I also have Simon, who is the only other currently introduced character who is also asexual. But I still want to put that out there anyway, because I find it really annoying whenever there's a story that has an ace character and anything with their identity is always just a subplot of they're dating a non-ace person and they won't have sex, and it makes me so mad. It's just we can do better. We can do better, please. But we'll now go to a character who already gets a whole chapter all to themselves, and that is our next character, Joel Azref. Joel is a photographer from Nashville who's decided to go to the Winchester College of the Creative Arts, or Wicca. 2 fun facts about Wicca, the first being that I actually named the school and its founder after the Winchester House, which, if you don't know, is this incredibly haunted house and was intentionally built to be like a maze, specifically for the spirits that were already inhabiting it before it became all maze-like. You're probably thinking it was for the Winchester rifle, and kind of yes, because the family that owned the house also was the one that made the rifle, but it was specifically for the house, not for the rifle. The second fun fact is that the abbreviation sounding like Wicca, paganism and all that, was not intentional. I didn't want Aria's school to have a generic sounding art college name, or I could have had the school be called the Winchester College of Art and Design, or WCAD for short. Or I could have gone with the Micah naming route and still have it pronounced the same as it is in comic. But I went with neither, and I'm glad I did because I think it is pretty unique. I like the Winchester College of the Creative Arts being the name for Wicca. It's a good name. But back to talking about Joel. Joel is our shy guy of the group, mostly in the back of most scenes and putting their 2 cents in when they feel like it, mainly to anything Ingrid is talking about. Their current group dynamic looks a lot like they're just there, and there's a reason for it, and one that we may learn more about in the current chapter. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Poor guy puts these non-existent boundaries in their head and acts on them even though they don't exist at all. I love writing for Joel a lot. Of all the main characters in the comic, Joel is the one member of the main cast who actually almost was not going to be in the story, and that is because I had no idea what kind of character they were going to be and why they should be sticking around. The Meredith wanting to put a band together part of the story was something I put together early on, even if it ended up getting pushed into a later part in the actual comic. If you're wondering, you keep saying Meredith wants to start a band, but Meredith is not mentioned at all in comic. I moved that around for reasons, but anyway. The process of doing that, like I said, changes dramatically, but I already had in mind for what I wanted the band to look like. Meredith and Nemesis on guitar and bass, Pacific as the singer since their singing is better than their poetry, sorry Pacific, and a drummer. None of the other main characters at the time really fit that role, so for a while there was just this vague drummer character with no name, and they had no real story, and the concept with them was just drummer. Whoever that character was going to be, they had to be involved in some way in the main story, so they couldn't just be a background character. But what was their deal? What did it even look like? And all that. I actually almost scrapped the idea of Meredith's band having a drummer just because I couldn't come up with an interesting character. And I was like, I don't know, maybe they could do something else for the drums. Until like one day when I was stocking shelves for the Bullseye store on the slow day, I had a thought that was like, what if this character's story is that they're a closeted non-binary person and they can't come out because they don't think they're queer enough to deserve it? And then I had so many thoughts after that. Specifically like my thoughts about like, yeah, actually it kind of sucks that people will gatekeep being non-binary to people, because God forbid if you're not a twinkie white person with dyed hair doing perfect androgyny, you are anything but a poser. I just like had that idea in my brain, and like everything just like got like super into place after that, and that final beautiful picture was Joel. And a lot of their story has changed since the first like big flood of inspiration, but that's all stuff to where their story leads to. And we're starting to get to the beginnings of it with chapter 4, so maybe check out my comic and see what's up, wink wink, nudge nudge. But we could talk about our next character in the story and the most important person in Joel's life, their girlfriend Ingrid Stein, and the one who just really, really likes monsters. Ingrid is a hyperactive woman who seems to be all over the place, but with everything she does, it always leads back to one goal: finding monsters in Aria. Ingrid loves everything weird and cryptid, and she probably, in a different reality, had either a scary story podcast like No Sleep or a true crime show. She likes her weird and creepy things. Ingrid is probably the oldest of all the characters in Harmony, not in age, but as a character that I have made. I originally made her back in either my sophomore or junior year of high school while I was working on an old project called Monsternia. I talk about it in my old webcomics video from last year. But originally she was the human friend of the main protagonist, who gets left behind after said protagonist leaves Earth for a monster world. Ingrid didn't get to go, and her role wasn't really a big one. It was very minor, like so minor she didn't even have a last name at the time, but she was a completely different person for that story than she is for this one. Very much a lot like Nemesis, and would have been a cool and somewhat aloof personality, but she was much more of an asshole. Not a very good friend, and after I dropped the project, she was just kind of there existing on my toy house for a while, and I was looking for the character who would be the force that would make the plot for In Harmony start, and like thinking like, what would this person be like in order to like get this very different group of people to go look to monsters together. And this person had to be very obsessed with monsters in order to do that, and I like reusing old characters when I can, and taking ones who I never really got to do much with, and putting them in the spotlight so they can like, get to work on being characters. And I ended up choosing Ingrid to be the character who fulfilled this role. She and Joel kind of came into conception around the same time, so I decided to make them a couple, and I like their dynamic. They're very cute. So I'm glad I made that choice. Like, Ingrid gets Joel to come out of their shell when she can, and Joel's knowing how to bring Ingrid back to reality when her endeavors get a little out of control. Speaking of down to earth, why don't we talk about our next character, Jules Fox, a character who hasn't been in Harmony much yet, but already has had like a lot of comment from her recent scenes in the story, which I'm like, tee. Jules is a sculptor who, like Pacific, is in her first year at Wicca, and although we don't know a lot about her yet, there already seems to be more about her than first impressions give. Jules very much was a character who I was like, you know what every art class has? The one student who seems to be the class prodigy, but is incredibly burnt out by all of it. I wanted Jules to be a character who seems to have it made, her work is recognized, she has some kind of familiarity even with the people who are supposed to be her superiors, and she has the skills and talent to be a great artist. But when you have that and people expect that from you constantly, how can someone grow and change into something else besides those expectations? And that was what Aria is to Jules, a place where she can maybe find herself again and get that passion for art that seemed to have fizzled out long ago. I can't say too much for where her story is going to go, as I want to keep some of my cards under the table, but I am so excited to get some of the stuff I've come up with so far. I can't wait to get to it. And whoa, yeah, it seems she also has some stuff going on with one of the other characters. Wonder what that's about. Anyway, let's not dwell on the little things. Let's talk about our next character and the last of the main cast, which is Seamus Cantor. Like Jules, Seamus has currently only been in Harmony for a little bit, but we will be seeing more of him as the story progresses. Seamus, like Pacific and Meredith, is from Aria, and the three of them actually grew up together as friends. Meredith and Seamus hung out a lot after Pacific moved away, but the two stopped talking to each other after Meredith started ignoring Seamus for reasons that Seamus does not quite understand yet. Maybe in the future, perhaps. For now, Seamus focuses on other things, getting Wicca to establish an official LGBT club, his internship job at In Harmony Radio, and spending time with his dad, friends, and neighbors. Seamus likes to be helpful and see the bright side of everything, but sometimes that leaves him blind in places where he very much should not be. He's got a lot of growing to do and a whole comic to get on with it. Seamus is a little unique because he originally was a character I had a dream about. I had a dream about like a alternate ending for In Harmony where Seamus was a character who was in it, and he played like such a huge part in the story up to that point, and like him and Meredith got into like a fight over something, and I don't remember exactly what that was about, but like I woke up and I was like, ooh, it's new character idea. Well, it won't be the first time that happened, and it certainly won't be the last. Of course, not everything from that dream was kept. I changed a lot of stuff. Like, for one, Seamus in that dream was very much like Tumblr sexy man, skinny, and I, like, for a while there was a version of Seamus that was like really skinny. You can find some art of him still, and I did not like drawing him. I was just like, I was not having fun drawing him, so I changed his design a bit, and now he's like the guy that we know and love from in the comic, and he's very fun. And, like, again, the ending for In Harmony has also changed, especially when I decided to go for a less overall tragic ending. So Seamus also had, like, a big change from the ending in the dream, because this one was also a pretty tragic ending. Lots of retconning, lots of tweaking, but his story is a lot stronger for it. And that is it for our main cast, but we have also been introduced to some other characters at the current point in the comic who are not part of the main cast, but they're still very important, so I want to talk about them before I close out this video, and we'll start with Pacific's father, Carl Servec. Carl is a handyman Aria working with Pacific's uncle Simon and their own contracting company. He mostly does electrical work as well as plumbing, but occasionally will work on renovation jobs. Carl is a bright, happy guy who likes his simple life and wouldn't trade it for the world. And a fun fact about his shirt, it actually is a reference to two old projects of mine, Promagnium and Monsternia. The diamond shape is the shape of the weapon from Promagnium, and the name After Tomorrow is a band that was in Monsternia. There was a bunch of like fake bands in that story that never got to do anything. Not for the plot, just like for background stuff. But I like to imagine that now In Harmony, After Tomorrow is some dad rock band from the 80s that Carl likes, and he just like has these old graphic tees with their logos on it. I like Carl a lot. I very much went into the mindset with him of making the most like dad that has ever dad. I also wanted him to be like very supporting, but like the oblivious parent compared to Pacific's mother, who, with what little we have heard of her, is the more overbearing of the two. But she may know something that Carl himself either does not see or just refuses to see. Very interesting. I also did not want any divorced parent drama when it came to Pacific's parents. Their divorce was amicable and they still get along as friends who occasionally talk to each other, and they do still care about each other, but there's a reason they split up, and that will be more looked into later. I just don't want to give the impression that Carl hates Pacific's mom and like vice versa. But speaking of Pacific's mom, let's talk about her brother and Pacific's uncle, Simon Hammer. Simon is the other founder of his and Carl's contracting company, working on repairs alongside his ex-brother-in-law, where they fix up Aria one broken electrical box at a time. Unlike Carl's more extroverted nature, Simon is more of an introvert, but not in like the shy way. He's more introspective and observant than Carl is, and can be the stricter of the two. However, that strictness comes from a very protective nature, and that comes with its own amount of baggage. Simon's the one I get a lot of questions about, like, what's with that scar? Wouldn't you like to know? Simon is also one of the more mysterious characters introduced in the comic yet. Apparently the guy is a monster hunter as well. What? That's so weird. Who would have thought? He's the one of the characters I'm more excited for you guys to know more about, and he's one of the only 3 characters who I actually originally came for a previous project that never got made and never got used. But I like the character concept so much that I kept him rolling around in my head until he got into a much better suited story. So everybody who follows this channel knows that I'm an avid podcast listener, and so naturally, of course, I have thought about making my own podcast before. Before I thought of In Harmony, I had an idea for a show, and no, it's not the current hypothetical podcast story that I do want to make someday. This was a different one, and it was very bare bones. I wanted to start off as an advice show, where the host gives advice to listeners, but the situations that they were being asked to provide advice for were becoming weirder and weirder. Eventually, we find out that there's another world beyond the veil that is darker and more terrifying than our own, but some of the inhabitants of said world have been able to hear the advice of the main protagonists. Some welcome it, using that advice to successfully solve their own problems and have shared the show with friends, but some of the others have decided to go after the main protagonists themselves. OG Simon was originally the character that tells the main protagonist all this after an inciting incident that causes them to meet, and Simon would have been a character who crosses the veil to the other side, making sure the violent and more destructive beings of that world don't cause too much trouble in ours. I like the concept for the story, but never really had any ideas of where to go with it. I would revisit it, maybe, possibly in the future, but I don't really know if I want to. I'll have to figure it out. It definitely would be a lot more different than what I have in mind. Simon is also not the only character I pulled from this idea, but that one I'm not going to talk about in this video because she hasn't really had an official introduction in the comic yet. But we can talk about a different character who is also the one in the spotlight of the current chapter of In Harmony, and the last one we will talk about today, and that is my favorite problematic girly, Deborah Shell, or Deb to her friends. Deb is a lot of things. A contractor working for Carl and Simon, a monster hunter, a recluse, but the most important thing about her is that she is my favorite fail girl, and I adore her. She has so many problems. Someday I'll get to elaborate on them, but for now, she's just roughing it and tumbling and hunting monsters and keeping annoying kids in the woods safe to, I don't know, for what end. She's good at it. That's it. She's just really good at it. Deb was a character who stemmed from me watching and listening to various pieces of media who had female characters who are like, basically they're all wet cats, like right after one after the other. Some of them are like really well written and great, like Sister Carpenter from the Silverses, who is my beloved. I love her. But then like there's some that aren't so great, like Deb from, I think that's her name, Deb from Dexter, and she deserved so much better writing. If you guys watch the show, you would know. I'm just like, the potential, it's there. And like, we all love our loser men characters, but what I crave is a good loser woman character who can still be awesome but also sucks. I'm thinking of like Fiona from Fiona and Cake, because she also is just like such a fail girl. And like, yeah, no, I just want more well-developed fail girl female characters. Like, you can have a fail girl, but she doesn't need to be a boss babe. And also, Deb got to have the fun introduction. Like, you're a hot woman holding an axe covered in blood can also be a loser. We love that. And that's the end for this video. I do want to put out that all these images being drawn in this video are on my Unveil page. This isn't a sponsored section of the video, so I'm not going to go into like a whole ad, but I really enjoy the site with Toy House. It feels a bit more organized, and also like, you don't have to like go through all my characters to see just the characters for this webcomic. So I've just like made little bios and been treating it like my own personal wiki page, as well as like making the like little world for In Harmony. If you want to go look at it, I'll put a link down below so you could go see like what I wrote. And yeah, congratulations, In Harmony now has like a quote-unquote wiki page. And if you like this video, consider leaving a like. More interaction means YouTube will promote my videos more, and I would like more people to see my stuff. Plus, it's a free way to support me. If you can't support me financially, I promise it makes all the difference. Thank you. And if In Harmony sounds interesting to you, then you should go read it. I have so much fun writing it, and we're getting strong into chapter 4 through the next year. And we got like a tiny little respite from the events of the beginning of this chapter. Right now, it is not going to be the last time we'll be seeing more ugly, monstrous friends, such as the guy that we just met. And you want to know where it's going to go? Then you're going to have to go read it on inharmony.thecomic.org. I also have a Patreon. My Patreon gets you access to all sorts of cool things, such as early access to InHarmony pages, sketches of InHarmony pages, concept art for InHarmony, and other projects such as animations and more. Your support helps me be able to spend more time making videos, and I already have a list of videos I want to make for the next year, so yeah, go do that, and I can't wait to share them. I also want to go ahead and promote my Etsy shop. One of my goals next year is to both do more stuff with my little community and also make new merch. In order to have the space to clear it out, I need to get rid of old merch, and once it's gone, it won't come back. Not like as like a limited time thing though. To make a long story short, with the exception of like a few items, I lost all of the old files to print more. I literally can't make any more once all the stuff is gone. I am sorry about that. I had somebody asking me to restock my Grimm's Matchstick charms, and I was like, ooh, those are one of the ones that I can't restock, sorry. But I can make new things for next year, so if you wanna, like, you know, if there's something in my store now that's interesting, go ahead and check it out, because I might be taking that stuff down soon. And so yeah, no, that's about it. The end of the year is coming up. I don't really have much to say about it. I have like everything currently is just like so much is going on at once while nothing is happening at the same time. It's very much like one of those things. So that's my year. I hope your year has been better. As for like videos, I have a comic recommendation, not comic recommendation, I have a podcast recommendation video coming out. I have a sketchbook tour coming out because I finally finished my sketchbooks. Now I have a sketchbook tour coming out. And yeah, that's it for the rest of the year. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you all later. Bye!